Mr. Speaker, as I said to the House last week, I took the decision that we should not join the initial US-Israeli offensive against Iran. The Leader of the Opposition attacked me for that decision relentlessly. She said that the UK should have joined the US and Israel in the initial offensive strikes. Mr. Speaker, then yesterday, in the wake of the economic consequences, the Leader of the Opposition totally abandoned her position. She told the BBC, "I never said we should join." She told the BBC, "I haven't said we should have gone in with the United States." That is the mother of all U-turns on the single most important decision a Prime Minister ever has to take, whether to commit the United Kingdom to war or not.
Fiery at the House of Commons. Joining us from London are Andrew Fox, Research Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, and Sir Liam Fox, the former British Defence Secretary and Chairman of the UK Abraham Accords Group. I want to start with you, Sir Liam. Looking at how the Israeli and US operations against Iran are playing out, do you think the UK should have participated in the opening blow against the Islamic Republic, or at least respond to the multiple drone attacks on UK forces based in Cyprus?
Yes, the UK should have been better prepared, given that this was not something that happened overnight and we had a long lead-up time to, with the deployment of the American forces to the Gulf and to the Eastern Mediterranean. The UK should have been ready. And I think the problem is that Keir Starmer, who has a nerve to talk about U-turns, given that he's completed more U-turns in the first year and a half of his government than most have in the past decade. The problem is that he did not want to send out signals to the left wing of the Labour Party or the Muslim section of his electorate that he was in line with the United States. And that's a big problem for the United Kingdom, because we now find ourselves, having been one of the strongest military partners of Israel and our allies in the Gulf, now looking as though we're lagging behind other countries. That's a problem for the UK in terms of its international reputation and for our future relations in the region. And all I can hope is that people will realize that the United Kingdom, the people of the United Kingdom are strong friends in the region and have historically been so, even if His Majesty's government at the present time is weak and incapable of doing anything other than sitting on the fence.
Mm-hmm. So, Andrew, I want to turn to you now. So the past is the past, but what about now? Should the UK get involved militarily against Iran?
I'm inclined to say no, for the simple reason that the Israeli Air Force and the US carrier groups down in the Gulf right now have this matter firmly in hand. And I'm not really sure what UK forces at this point would really bring to the party other than a diplomatic gesture to show support. It's worth remembering, of course, that the Americans have spent the last year telling us to take responsibility for Europe's security. And unfortunately, we have another war that's much closer to home for the United Kingdom in Ukraine. That is our defense priority right now. That is what we need to focus on, protecting the high north and, of course, America's eastern flank as much as our own northern flank. We need to make sure we have solidarity with Israel and America, but we also need to make sure that we do not take our eye off the ball in Ukraine, and that really does need to be our priority at this point.
I want to go back. Excuse me. I want to go back to Liam for a second. Liam, you talked about how Keir Starmer essentially had to play to his base, and that limited his options. But the reality is, there is a Muslim population in the UK. They vote. They're organized. They're going to continue to vote and be organized. There is also wider circles of people, wider circles of people who are skeptical of the United States. Given that public opinion, what can British governments do over the medium term and long term when you're in similar situations down the road, when the United States is taking action, parts of the public are reluctant? What can the British government nevertheless do, given that public opinion, to advance what you see as Britain's interests?
We mustn't ever see the level of voice of minorities as being confused with mass. We have approximately 16% of the UK population that is not white British, if you want to put it that way. And we must recognize that we cannot be pushed around by minority opinion because they may have a disproportionate impact on marginal seats in a general election. We need to take the right decisions. As Margaret Thatcher used to say, there may be unpopular decisions, but they can have popular consequences if we get them right. And we need to do the right thing. It's absolutely true that our priority in Europe is the war in Ukraine. That is what threatens the very values that NATO stands for. But we cannot, I'm afraid, choose that because we have a conflict in one region that we have to give our attention to, that we can ignore another conflict that has direct impacts on our national security and the national security of our allies. Britain has a long-standing involvement and reputation in the Gulf, and we need to continue that. And I'm not saying that we should have been involved in the initial wave of attack, as perfectly correctly been said. The United States and Israel are more than capable of dealing with that. But we should be giving our political support and our secondary military support to the events in the region to show that we are absolutely solid with our allies in confronting what is one of the most evil and vicious regimes in the world, which is absolutely stands opposite to all the values that a civilized world can possibly have.
I hope no one gets Fox whiplash, because Andrew, I want to bring this one to you. In terms of military strategy, how are you viewing what is playing out in Iran right now?
Well, look, it all depends on the end state. That's been relatively clearly articulated. The Americans have made it very clear they're looking at missile capability, naval capability, and nuclear capability. And on top of that, Mr. Trump has made some fairly extensive statements about unconditional surrender, which may or may not be a war goal at this point. The target pack that we've seen developing over the last 9 days has been very logical, moving from the high leadership through to missile launches, making sure that the Gulf states wouldn't be overwhelmed by the rate of fire from the Iranians. That's now heavily reduced to manageable levels. And now we're starting to see it, reporting tonight suggests that we're seeing the hunting of internal security forces in an attempt to break down that kind of vice-like grip they have over the population of Iran. So we're seeing a very logical progression of targets. The question is, how do you achieve regime change from the air? And that's extremely difficult. Something will need to happen on the ground. And it's about setting the conditions for that to happen if it's going to.
Now, for either of you, this raises such an interesting question to me, not about the Middle East, but about Britain and what it is that the British Army should do. On the one hand, what you're both saying essentially is the UK isn't a superpower like the United States that can project power and fight an all-out war in Iran. On the other hand, you don't want to be Switzerland, a country with a wonderful army, but it's there to protect its borders. What's the right middle role for the British Army? Not necessarily to fight large-scale wars far away in the Middle East, but also not to hunker down on the island.
Well, it's not about the British Army. The Army has almost no impact on this environment whatsoever. But in terms of British naval power and air power projection, there are things that we can bring. We've had attacks on the British bases in Cyprus, probably from pro-Iranian forces based in Lebanon. We need to be willing to deal with that and, if necessary, counter that. But I think that what we can bring also is political guidance to our allies in the region. What we're seeing now is, I think, an increasing separation between the Iranian state, the president on one hand, and the Iranian armed forces, and on the other hand, the theocracy, which has brought devastation to Iran and terror to the wider region. And I think that the key thing here is whether the United States and the Israeli coalition, aided, I hope, by its allies, can actually bring pressure on that theocratic cancer in Iran to be able to diminish its ability to wage war and terror while leaving the wider state in Iran intact. It's a very difficult thing to do. And as my colleague was just saying, it's easier said than done when you have a country as complex as Iran, and where you have a theocracy so deeply embedded in the means of production and the other parts of the Iranian economy and society. It's very hard to disaggregate them from the rest of the population. It may well be that the action that's been taken by Israel and the United States now gives sufficient courage to the very brave people of Iran to rise up against this very toxic regime, but it may well take more than one wave to do so, if indeed it's possible.
Andrew, your thoughts?
Well, in terms of going forward from here, I suppose the economic picture is one that does need watching. Oil prices have been all over the place with the markets panicking. Each announcement from Washington sees them go up and down depending on how positive or negative they perceive the commentary. And of course, if that extends into days or weeks, that could have a global inflationary shock, which will have rippling repercussions for China, Russia, and a variety of other malign actors, as well as the Western societies who are on the side of right in this debate between the darkness of Iran's regime and Israel and America going forward. But we have to, I would echo Sir Liam's comments. It's about commitments to actually making a manifest difference to the Iranian regime and the people of Iran and the regime's ability to control them and keep them downtrodden and under this authoritarian heel. So it's about finding a balance between getting this done and also keeping an eye on making sure that we don't bankrupt the rest of the planet in doing so.
Andrew Fox, Sir Liam Fox, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening.